Welcome to the Weed Out, where we weed out the nonsense and talk bullshit in our backyard. I'm Spencer Fox Peterson. Today, this episode is just going to be me. We're going to do something a little different today on the Weed Out. Instead of a little more investigative, journalistic type things, we're going to have a concept episode, kind of more like a verbal essay. Joanna, our wonderful co-host, she is off this week. She is taking some much needed R&R. She is the backbone of the Weed Out. Without her, this doesn't happen. She makes everything happen. As far as, she even made an interview happen because my work was busy during the holiday time. So I wanted to definitely take time and show appreciation for the Weed Out community and from me, myself, for Joanna. She's excellent. She's de facto executive producer. We share a lot of the responsibilities here at the Weed Out. We do, but Joanna is the rock. She's consistent and she's very driven. So it's very important to call out your loved ones. And without her, we don't have a show. So her dedication, her skills really are great. The research background, her reading capability is better than most. To say at least, and instead of spending too much time on this, but I think it's important to, it's good to know your strengths and weaknesses. And at the Weed Out, I am a talker. I work through things verbally. I was never a great student. I wasn't an avid reader. I do read, much to the chagrin of my spouse. She makes jokes. She's much more voracious, vociferous reader, but I am just a verbal person. So that's what we're gonna try this episode out, and we're gonna do kind of like a monologue. We'll call it Real Talk with Spencer Fox. The roots of this is actually tied to my retail days as a retail butcher. After I left that space and no longer did retail butchery anymore, just customer facing, helping people solve their problems, hearing about their gastrointestinal issues, all the way up to how much they hate their mother-in-law this time of year. Not to say that I was a therapist, but in a way I was a confident and without even realizing it, people would come and they would ask a question about cooking meat, history of cooking meat, sausage, whatever, just in my brain, and my skill is kind of bullshitting. When I was a kid, I wasn't the world's greatest test taker, but I could do an oral presentation, and part of it was I just had a feel, So the reason I wanted to bring up Real Talk is there was a joke at the shop I worked at that, Spencer, man, it's like he ends a story or ends a point about why they call it this or why they call it that. Like, why is it called Vice Versa, which is a white sausage? Like, I'd go into a little history spiel about that. And I'm like, and that's, why it's not German, it's Bavarian. And I'd like take a sip of my drink, make some sort of punctuation and walk away. And the joke was, that's Real Talk with Spencer. So I figured I'd kind of bring that style here to the podcast, give it a shot, and kind of wanted to talk about one of my biggest pet peeves. And we're trying to bring good news with the Weed Out, but I also want to grab the listeners, potentially friends that I know in person, and I can be insufferable if you get me on this topic at a bar. So this is the chance to share with everybody how I really feel in a contained space when you're in a good headspace to hear this. We live in a world that it's all based on whiteness, the concept of whiteness. What is that? It's not just skin color. Yes, of course, skin color is very important, but it's about power. It's about purity. It's about civility. It's about the quote unquote, the way things are done. The eco-fascist statement of it's human nature to be greedy, which is all bullshit. Truthfully, humans are social creatures. If we weren't social creatures, we would be isolationists. Like, we'd be isolated. We wouldn't work in groups. We wouldn't have teams. We wouldn't play team sports. We wouldn't do any of this stuff. And even a single athlete, like a tennis player, for example, they have a team, their coaches, their support system. So it's like even the individual sports, it takes a team, and anybody worth their salt that's successful in anything knows no man's an island. And we live in this culture. We're steeped in it. It's every day what we call normal, and it's actually abnormal in the history of human civilization. We're social creatures. To have hierarchies and silos of governments and press, this is the world we live in. It's the frog in the water. You put the frog in when it's lukewarm, you raise the temperature, and before you know it, the water's boiling and the frog doesn't know any wiser and doesn't get out. And that's where we're at. So when we talk about, trust the institutions, trust the police, or you're looking at your Twitter feed, your Facebook feed, and Mass Live or WWLP, our local quote unquote publications of journalism, which are, part of a bigger conglomeration in some way. So it's not really truly local. That's why it's important to support local journalists, because we're getting our fingers in stuff. And hopefully we're not have the same profit motive as the owner class. All that to be said, we take a lot of things for granted. For example, you're scrolling on your Twitter feed, you're scrolling whatever. You open a newspaper. Or you're at a gas station and everybody's talking about, so for example, last week or last month, there was a violent incident at MGM Springfield where an upset person was smashing windows and being violent, truthfully. But how much time and resources the police put in to telling the news and the news regurgitating that fact, and then we spend all our time punching down on this one individual. But we're not talking about the wage theft. We're not talking about the other issues that literally affect us all. Our healthcare premiums. We don't talk about that's a crime. Not having clean drinking water, being ignored, like the amount of lead that's in Holyoke, and nobody wants to do anything about it because we don't have any money and we're not worth it. And there is no war but class war. So all that to say, we're swimming in this thing. This is just what it is. This is baseline. I'm not going to have a conversation with anybody ever in person or even here. This is the baseline. I'm not going to debate that. That's it. The debate's over. The debate won't start if somebody won't come to me with that. Listen, this is it. We know profit motive drives everything. There's no big conspiracy. There's no mastermind pulling strings. It's just profit motive. So having a discussion about economics and all that stuff isn't really my forte. So I don't get into the whole what system would be perfect. I just know that profit motive above all else ends in exploitation. It's plain as day, and we all swim in it. We accept the fact that our boss, who likely had some inherited money or had something to leverage to get money, to be able to own the trucks to do the thing, right? Whatever you do for a living. You work at a flower nursery or a plant nursery, and your boss is making hand over fist over money for you, and there's still the same amount of hours in the day, all right? So why wouldn't the news and the owner class, they all own stuff. They don't have to be colluding directly. They don't have to be doing this like movie style thing. It's not complicated. It's profit motive. So that's the world we live in. But where we participate is the spending more time talking about the robbery at the gas station and how we need to crack down on crime. Like, you're punching down. You're punching down in that situation. Like, a person gets to the point where they're not with it and they need to do violent things, like stick up a gas station or damage property at MGM because they're having a mental episode or whatever is the issue. Why are we spending all this time focusing on this one individual? It fits right into everything else in America. It's all about the individual. If you work hard, you can rise. Well, if we all work hard and we all rise, then there's no one on the bottom. So we know that's a lie. You always need somebody on the bottom in this system. It's an MLM. It's a pyramid scheme. And the reason I want to talk about this stuff is because we swim in it, we accept it, we literally we're propagandists in our own right. And unlearning this stuff is hard. And if anybody, this might be a good time to remind everybody or tell everybody, share with my background, though I'm a laborer and a food service worker, I literally sweat every day. I don't use my brain as much, which is why you guys have this show, because I need to use my brain somewhere, and here we are. And you're welcome for that. LOL. So my bona fides are, I went to school for communications. I have a bachelor's degree from UMass in communications. So my mind is always kind of looking at media. I can't help it. I don't do anything for a living in regard to that other than the weed out. But I noticed patterns and trends in the media. And, this is a good time to shout out some journalists that I follow that help me understand these things. I'm not coming to these conclusions on their own, on my own. But we're all propagandists. We're all spreading this bullshit, whether we realize it or not. When I've had personal friends in my life scold me for being angry about unjust things in public. And it's like, you're more mad about the civility, and you're trying to say you're an ally to non-white people while using civility on an uppity white person. You're trying to keep me in line as a white person. You're trying to tell me, Spencer, oh no. And it's not, for me, in this particular conversation, I was upset because race was never brought up by me. I was talking about working class and poor people mostly. It was like, this technology the Northampton PD is going to bring in, this isn't good for us. This is bad. This is a dragnet. This hurts everybody. And then it was about race. Because, again, white people, we cannot understand this. We can't untie this. And even well-meaning people, they're well-meaning. I don't think people are bad. I just think it's so beaten in after 400, 500 years of these lies. And it's normalized. And you can have a black face on white supremacy. You can have a female face on misogyny. It's possible. We see examples of it all the time. And I also don't want to focus on those people because it's not my place to tell non-white men what to do, right? And even telling other people what to do, it's like, I'm just going to do my thing. But we need to call each other out when it comes down to community safety and spreading propaganda for the state, for the oppressors, for the owner class via mass live news, focusing on that detail about looting at a protest or a riot, focusing on those details. That stuff's insured. Don't worry about it. And it's nameless, faceless corporations for the most part. Yes, mom and pop stores get hurt, but they're still operating in the same system we are. All right. I can respect the people I've worked for, but also understand they exploited me. Whether they realize it or not, that was the end result. This isn't a debate about, did you mean to? It happened. And that's the history of the United States. We have to face it, and we need to address propaganda first and foremost, because this is the stuff, it's so insidious. You can't click, I swear to God, you scroll on Facebook, you look at a thumbnail, it's kitten caught in tree, said police spokesperson, and they put a police car in the thumbnail. It's these subtle things, right? Telling kids, bringing cops to schools and saying, you can trust these people. No, you can't. They're agents of the state. They are legally allowed to lie to you. Fact me on this. They can lie to you, all right? They can, in like 30-something states, they can legally sexually assault you while you're in their custody. There's loopholes and protections for them. They have qualified immunity. The law means less when it comes to holding them accountable. And the reason for that is because if they hold them accountable, this awful culture of white supremacy enforced through policing and then reinforced and normalized through propaganda, right? I'm not a big proponent of burning motherfucking buildings down and hurting people physically, right? I'm not going to also say being nonviolent is the only way, because history says in A lot of people I respect say, unfortunately, violence sometimes happens, right? It's part of it. But the violence is being done to us. This is the water we're swimming in. It's micro cuts, paper cuts. And I take personal offense every time I see some hack journalism where they're literally regurgitating what the police PR person said. And why do the police have a PR team? You know, Holyoke doesn't even have a full-time grant writer for programs, but they got one in the police department and they got a PR guy. Why? A lot of time, a lot of money spent on this stuff, and it's only to the detriment of the working class. Okay? It hurts me. It hurts you. It's worse for trans people, for gay people, for black people, black women especially, indigenous women. Even when something that the police aren't responsible for, and again, this can all be backed up. You can Google every single one of these things and this can be backed up. The rate of looking for black and indigenous women compared to like white girls by the police, the police aren't responsible for the people going missing, okay? But like the resources they'll put in to go save a little white girl because of propaganda, because then they can prop that person up as a martyr. Another way you see propaganda, right? I see a story about an officer who died in the line of duty, whether in a car accident, through shooting, drown. Sometimes they die of COVID. Like that's counted as, and remember that's counted as stats on their death. So all the stats are skewed. So they count COVID deaths as dying in the line of duty, for example. So they bump up their own stats, all right? But I see a story about somebody, an officer dying, and it's made up to be this huge thing. Right? They're not even the top 20 of deaths by occupation. Huge thing, martyr, toughest job ever, so dangerous. And they use the death of somebody to justify their bloated budgets, their dangerous conduct, the actual concept of policing, throwing people in cages. The amount of violent crime is minuscule. Mostly we're dealing with mental health crisis, poverty, trickle down of poverty, stealing, whatever. All of this to keep this institution of white supremacy around, right? And they will ultimately side, they are class traders, they'll ultimately side with the owner class because they pay them a little bit more than they would make as a truck driver. In return, they get these little pittance of 30 up to 30% more than the average working person. If they, with their same education, their same skills, they'd be doing a grunt job just like me. All right, I'm far more educated than the cop. Cops only have, like, on average, I think on average it's like 16 weeks of training total, and then maybe some continuing ed, maybe depending on the department. This is just dangerous, but the only solution is to throw people in cages. Why are we allowing the state? I thought this was the land of the free. We're throwing people in cages when most of this crime is not violent. And the benefit is profit motive. That's why the propagandists at WWLP and the local police, they work together. It's not a collusion. It's just, profit makes bedfellows, right? And protection of said profit. It's an organized racket ring. And propaganda is the thing that we participate in. And that's what we can control. Stop clicking that shit. Even to mock it. Call out your friends. SVU, Law and Order SVU. Bum, 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 bum. That's not what cops do. It's a lie. And that the creator of that show had said that it's about making cops look good. It's straight up propaganda. All right? We spend more on policing than all but 3 countries' militaries. We're talking nuclear shit. We're talking about defense. We're talking about all this stuff, all the overhead. The only countries ahead of it is China and the United States military. So in the United States, we have a military that's number 1 in the world in spending, by far. And then number 3 is our U.S. policing system. And by that logic, wouldn't we have a really fucking safe country? Wouldn't we live in a utopia if that budget was justified? No. Instead, we have leeches on our tax base. that uphold the owner class, down to Eric Sewer in Holyoke. And the mayors are in on it. And it's not a big deal. It's not like this big grand scheme. It's not a movie. It's just profit motive and protecting status quo. So we have the third most invested in military roaming the streets of our own country against its own people with an incarceration rate that is 25. We have 25% of the world's incarcerated in the United States. 25%. This is fact me and fuck off. Like we have, with only 5% of the population. Think about that. We have the third largest military in the world is domestic U.S. policing. Okay. We have 25% of the world's incarcerated with only 5% of the world's population. We live in a police fascist state, okay? And it's up to all of us to call out propaganda, to stop participating in it. And that's, that's Real Talk with Spencer Fox. That's what I wanted to get across this week. So thank you for joining us. And please tune into the Weed Out. Please follow us on all social media, Twitter, YouTube, Twitch, whatever you like to do. We're going to get all that stuff really ramping into gear in the next year. We have some cool stuff coming up. Please, if you want to donate or help fund local media, we have a Patreon. But if you don't want to help us monetarily, that's fine. Money's tight. I consider this my duty. And it's also my duty to my loved ones so I can focus somewhere and they don't have to listen to me rant endlessly. So this is a win-win for everybody. And we want to bring in call to action. We want to highlight workers. We want to highlight other journalists doing really good work. And that's what we're going to do here at the Weed Out. And so you can go to our Patreon. You can support us there. And if not us, you can check out the Shoestring. And multiple other journalists that work with the Shoestring freelance. Joanna and I are freelancers with the Shoestring, shoestring.org. We recently wrote a piece that accompanied our Lady Killigrew episode. So, again, thank you for joining us. Thank you for listening. Next week, Joanna will be back, and keep weeding out the ghouls.